Hello everyone, happy Thursday, and here we are looking at the liquidations heat map for the last 24 hours of Bitcoin. Now, in the last few hours, we have come down and liquidated this zone of intense pressure, support, at 56,900, and we've come up and we're starting to consolidate. So the orders are being mitigated. There's been a liquidation in the market. In the last 24 hours, we've seen $92 million worth of liquidations across 36,000, a bit more than 36,000 traders. So, as we see here, let's just move down to the 1 hour chart because that's what we like to work through. We can see that we are the zone that we were talking about yesterday that was potential support and broke through and is now we were looking at potentially using as resistance. We blew through at midnight Brisbane time, Australia, which was the start of the US trading day. So as we fell through during the Asian session, the US consolidated through the London session, and then we blew through to the positive side, the bullish side, during the US session. Now we've consolidated throughout the US, and now we've fallen back down as support during the Asian session today. Now, we are currently in that last hour. We had 0.98% of a decline in the last hour from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, and in the last 52 minutes, we've been up 0.19%. So we really have kind of just found this little moment where we've liquidated and now we're just finding a moment of breathing room. So that's pretty interesting to see. So we still have this potential where we came up. My idea was we were going to come up, we were going to bounce around and move up higher. However, the fact that we've come up and we've liquidated and found resistance at this point, and with a little bit more detail, I think we could be in for a little bit more of a move to the downside. Not necessarily 100%, but I think there is still a level. If you see this blue line here, this trend line, this is actually, if we move to the hourly, this is the bullish uptrend from, this is the bullish uptrend from the carry trade. So I've drawn that line out, and so we're still above the uptrend of that carry trade within the buy side liquidity of that regressive trend channel. So we still can come down to this trend line right here and be bullish. Anything below that level, so let's say potentially at this point, anything below 56,000 is starting to get us to sweat just a little bit. But, you know, like we all know that price moves in a wave, it moves up, it moves down, consolidates in between. So let's just move back to the hourly. And cool. So with this line down here, we still have this as a reasonable area of understanding of support. It doesn't mean that it's actually a line where we want to look to buy and sell from, but it's a zone where we see that there's a general, as price moves away from an average, it tends to reflect back, and that's what creates the average trend line of these regressive trend channels. So as we're coming down here, we are in the sell side liquidity of it, so we can come down to potentially bounce here and we can still be bullish. However, we can also come down here, bounce, and then we can also move down to further liquidity levels. At this area just here at 57,000, pretty much 57,000, that's the 50% pullback of this entire move from the low of the carry trade to the high and back down. We've basically touched through the 50% line, the 0.5 move, and then we found ourselves sitting above, and now we're currently at that level. So we're still at a relatively strength space. So it is a strong position. We are in the sell side, but we're also in the buy side, and we're at a 50%. So we're kind of in this like balancing act of critical, what will we do? Now we need to see a move to one direction or the other. This is an area where we're like straight up bullish, straight up bearish. But we kind of have this area where there is support here, there is resistance here. Like we've clearly found resistance before we met this imbalance that we were talking about yesterday. Now, if we move on to a few other charts, let's go on to the DXY. So, over the last hour, the DXY has come up, touched this area of the daily liquidity like we mentioned, and we have fallen. Now, as we've fallen, we are finding a little bit of support, bounce, bounce. Now we are starting to come down again. Whether we find support or weakness is left to be decided. But basically, as we are finding a bit of weakness here, that is Japan still doing its damage, in the sense that the Japanese yen is getting strength, and as the Japanese yen gets strength, the US dollar gets weaker against Euro and Japanese. So the DXY, as it comes down, as it starts to fall, we are starting to see that we can start potentially moving to these lower levels. So even though we're on the buy side, we are on a downwards trend. And as this falls, even though the DXY is coming down, because the Japanese yen is gaining strength completely, that is the problem that we're dealing with here. And so what carries this through is on the VIX, you can see that we are on a daily incredibly bullish. So whereas the VIX is increasing on the S&P, the volatility, fear comes into the market. And as fear comes into the market, risk on assets like Bitcoin and all the cryptocurrencies start to get de-risked. So everyone's coming out of crypto at the moment as volatility increases, and until we see, now this is just no direct line, but until we see a peak and a fall, we're not going to see any positive upward moves of Bitcoin. So we need to see the VIX find a peak and start to fall away and move down to the downside. Until we see that, until we see this move of the VIX to the downside, we're not going to get any positive moves, any meaningful positive moves on Bitcoin. So there's the things I'm looking at. So the DXY is losing value, even though it normally works in opposite. The fact that the Japanese yen is gaining strength because they're withdrawing money from the US. It's not about a stronger, but they're basically pulling money from the US into Japan. That's the reason for the DXY to be fallen. As that's falling, the VIX that's pulling money out of the S&P 500, which is starting to increase the volatility of the VIX, which is getting everyone to take their money out of risk on assets like Bitcoin and the S&P 500, which is making them to fall. So that's what gives me the bias to the downside. So with that being said, we are at support at this 50% level, but there's nothing to be said that we won't start to challenge this 618 level at 55,150. So that's where my kind of bias is going. I don't want to see anything going to the downside, but shorting opportunities is I want to see price to bounce around here a little bit and then start to move down to the downside. One other thing I want to sort of take into consideration is at the moment Bitcoin is sitting at the 50% level from the move from the carry trade, from the low to the high. We've come back to the 50% level. Now, total crypto market cap, including Bitcoin, what we've seen is we have fallen yesterday, just above the 618 level, and we are below the 50% level. Now let's move over onto crypto market cap excluding BTC and ETH and stablecoins. And if we go down to the downside, we have rejected over the last hour off. And that's not the right spot. Crazy me. We're 50% up from yesterday's fall. Alright, let's go back here. So if we go from the top, drag it down to the bottom, we're still sitting in the same sort of area. So the 618 level was touched yesterday, just like Bitcoin, but instead of sitting at the 50% level, the rest of crypto is actually sitting below the 50% line. So if we look at Bitcoin, we are above, and if we look at total excluding ETH, stablecoins, and Bitcoin, we are below. So there's weakness in the market of crypto, which just gives support towards the DXY, the VIX, and the S&P. So let's actually have a quick look at the S&P. We are in the off-peak time of sorts. We're still in this bearish move. We'll just drag this across now. Where are we here? Drag this across. That's no longer valid. That seems to be playing its way out. And so we have this potential here where we've come through and we're sitting through these levels. So let's just tidy them up, because they're the zones that we can be challenging. So the upwards resistance as far as liquidity levels is 5,598, so pretty much the 5,600 level. This seems to be a zone of liquidity. The low at the tail end of August, the 29th of August, the high of yesterday, the 5th of September. So that's another liquidity retest. So we've got a peak, even though we have wicked it, it is still pretty significant. We've broken through, we've touched, we've fallen away. So that's a level that I want to watch. Now we still have these levels down here at the 54,000, 5,450, 54,000. I'm still in Bitcoin dollars, Bitcoin figures. So at the 5,450 is our next level of support. We just move quite quick. Yeah, so we've got a fair value gap here. There's a real imbalance. And what happens with imbalances is we're actually looking at this as a phase 2. Now, a phase 1 is when the candle is still alive. Phase 2 is when the second candle, so we've got the first candle, the second candle is where the imbalance is formed, and the third candle is the completion and the confirmation of the imbalance. Once that phase 2 is complete, it's that third candle is closed, which shows, and so now we're coming back with that imbalance. We are coming down to fill that imbalance, so we are reaching that third phase of this imbalance occurring. So price generally falls through it, and I'm feeling lucky. So even though we are at the buy side of this negative liquidity, I don't see us going any further above there, but we are starting to chase those levels at 450. So that is my bias for today. We've got this imbalance here, which is occurring. I'll just draw it out just for the gigs and for the fans at home that no one watches. But I love to do this regardless. So as that draws across, we've bounced along we're not finding any area to come through it yet. There was some buying support through there as spot buyers came through. Now we've come through and we're bouncing along, and we'll either fall through or we'll move to the upside. However, even though we're on the bullish side of this, we're on the bearish side of this we're on the buy side of both the bullish trend line, we're on the buy side of the bearish trend line, but because we're seeing weakness in the DXY, the VIX, we're sitting just above an imbalance. There's already weakness in the market, which can see us to not go any further than 5,550, and we've got far more chance of going down to 5,450. So that's my bias for today. If we fall through here, that gives more weight on Bitcoin to lose some market share as well, and that will be de-risked. So I'm looking for the downsides for both. Targets for Bitcoin, just quickly, is I'm looking to challenge these levels here at 55,570, but I want to see a bit of a play in these candles. So as we break the low of this wick of 56,921, then that is bearish for me, and I'm looking to move further to the downside. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.